Good morning and welcome back to the hearing on Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas dockets number 2023-8-E and 2023-10-E, which is the IRP. We have taken testimony yesterday and I'm going back today. Duke is still putting their case up. Mr. Wellman, since Mr. Trawick's hiding behind the podium over there, I just received this morning a list of conflicts, it's quite a few.
We have a number of witnesses, Chair Powers. Certain of our witnesses will be testifying in other jurisdictions on dates certain, and others have personal family matters. But I think it's an artifact of how many witnesses we have, frankly, and how complicated these issues are. But if it pleases the chair, we'll work through it as best we can. We're planning to put up all of our remaining direct witnesses today, so we'll get through those, and then we'll get to the other parties' testimony.
Well, I'm not going to tell you how to try your case. It's, this thing's been scheduled a long time. I just hope you can work around this. It's already like keeping puppies in a box, getting all this done, but there's no problem as far as today, though, right?
No, sir. We'll burn through it.
Okay. First of all, let me state that all commissioners are present in the hearing room, and we'll go ahead and all the parties are present. Is that correct? Everybody's here, ready to go? It's raining, we might as well. Mr. Welborn, it's your day. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The companies would first call Mark McIntyre to the witness stand.
Chair Powers, this is Kate Mixon for
Yes.
CCL et al. Before Mr. Welborn calls his first witness, I did want to let the commission know, we, recognizing that the hearing has been moving more quickly at this stage than we expected, we have been able to shift some of our witness conflicts around, and we will have Maria Rumpani and Jake Duncan available to testify this afternoon. Mr. Duncan may not be able to testify until mid-afternoon because he's traveling from Chattanooga. And then tomorrow morning, Graham Turk and Michael Goggin will be able to testify.
Okay, now everybody's agreeable to all that?
That's right, Chair Powers. We're willing to be flexible.
Okay, go ahead, just keep me informed.
We'll do our best. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Trawick?
And Mr. McIntyre is going to appear virtually this morning.
All right. Me? Okay. Mr. McIntyre, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
If you would raise your right hand, let me swear you. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Mr. Trawick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. McIntyre. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Certainly. My name is Mark McIntyre.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Carolinas as Energy and Environmental Affairs Director.
Did you review and adopt 7 pages of Mr. Cliff Pompey's supplemental direct testimony that was pre-filed with the commission in these dockets?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your adopted direct testimony?
I do not.
If I ask you the same questions today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, at this time, pursuant to Standing Hearing Officer Directive 2024-73H, I move that Mr. McIntyre's adopted direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed adopted direct testimony, Mr. McIntyre, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. McIntyre, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please share that with the commission at this time?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In the supplemental direct testimony of Cliff Pompey that I've adopted pursuant to Standing Hearing Officer Directive 2024-73H, I explain that the offshore wind market is a new and developing industry in the United States with very few operational wind turbines. The companies do not currently own offshore wind development assets, such as a wind energy area lease. Those are frequently referred to as WIA. But we have been evaluating potential resource availability in the Carolinas, the timeline for achieving commercial operation, and the costs and risks of deploying offshore wind. The companies believe additional information is needed to better assess offshore wind, particularly given that we do not currently hold a WIA lease. To facilitate more detailed consideration of offshore wind, the companies are proposing to issue an acquisition request for information to provide a structure in which the current WIA lessees can provide more detailed information regarding proposed acquisition structures, including proposed acquisition or development fees, payment structuring, and risk sharing, along with updated pricing. This concludes my supplemental direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Mr. Chairman, Mr. McIntyre is now ready for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you very much. Cross-examination, Sierra Club,
No questions.
Carolinas.
All of us. No questions. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Whitt.
On some of these witnesses, we need to inquire of Mr. Burns. If he's on now, can we inquire of him if he has questions?
Okay.
I have no questions of Mr. McIntyre. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Walmart,
No questions.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Mr. Chair, we'll reserve till rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any?
No, go ahead. I'll
No,
wait
go
for
ahead.
commissioner questions. No, I was going to say that, forgot to mention at the outset that every witness coming today will be back for rebuttal,
Okay.
in the company's case at least.
All right. Well, I imagine commissioners have any questions at this time, or we'll save our questions for later.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask that Mr. McIntyre be excused.
Mr. McIntyre is excused. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The companies would now call Laurel Meeks and Justin LaRoche to the stand.
Yeah, I know.
Ms. Meeks, if you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. And Mr. LaRoche, do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair Powers, Commissioners. Kristen Athens, appearing on behalf of Duke Energy this morning. I'll start with you, Mr. LaRoche. Would you please state your full name for the record?
Justin LaRoche.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy as the Director of Renewable Development.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared 17 pages of direct testimony pre-filed with the Commission on October 24th, 2023?
Yes.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. LaRoche's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. LaRoche, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. LaRoche, did you also review and adopt 14 pages of Ms. Mara Farber's pre-filed direct testimony with the Commission in this proceeding?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your adopted direct testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the same questions that appear in your adopted direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, at this time, pursuant to the Commission's September 9th, 2024 Standing Hearing Officer Directive Number 2024-73H, I move that Mr. LaRoche's adopted direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The adopted testimony of Mr. LaRoche will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Mr. LaRoche, did you prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct and pre-filed adopted direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please present your summary at this time?
My name is Justin LaRoche. I'm the Director of Renewable Development at Duke Energy. My direct testimony supports the company's analysis, resource planning, and proposed execution of 1,200 megawatts of onshore wind resources by 2033 as proposed in the 2023 IRP. Having adopted the direct testimony of Maura Farber, I also support the company's analysis, planning, and proposed execution of solar and solar plus storage, more commonly abbreviated as SPS, resources in the IRP. I begin my onshore wind and solar and SPS direct testimonies by discussing the changing energy landscape, the operational characteristics, the policies that impact the development of onshore wind and integration of solar and SPS resources into the company's systems in the Carolinas. In my onshore wind testimony, I explained the company's efforts to assess onshore wind opportunities in the Carolinas through stakeholder engagement activities and the development of an onshore wind siting feasibility study. The company is engaged in a multi-step stakeholder engagement process with onshore wind developers, wind turbine manufacturers, onshore wind consulting firms, and potential permitting agencies. The key findings from this process were, 1, that developers were unlikely to participate in an onshore wind facility RFP in 2023 or 2024. And 2, developers were interested in pursuing potential development partnerships with the companies to site and develop onshore wind in the Carolinas. The companies also performed a siting feasibility study to identify potential onshore wind sites within the Carolinas, which confirmed that there is a reasonable number of potential onshore wind development sites located in North and South Carolina. Additionally, the companies engaged with onshore wind turbine manufacturers to understand current products, product roadmaps, and turbine technology suitable for the Carolinas. To support the timeline to bring 1,200 megawatts of new onshore wind facilities online by January 2033, significant early-stage development activities are required, which the companies believe have prepared a reasonable, executable plan to achieve. In the solar and SPS testimony that I adopted, I provide an overview of the company's ongoing efforts to integrate solar and SPS into the company's generation and resource mix. My testimony supports these ongoing activities as well as the company's execution planning to procure additional solar and SPS to be developed in the near term between now and 2026. Finally, my direct testimony provides an overview of the company's planned system-wide procurement of solar and SPS resources selected in the resource plan and provides an update on the company's plans for the upcoming 2024 solar RFP process, as well as additional solar and SPS procurements in the 2025 and 2026. This concludes the summary of my direct testimonies.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Now I will turn to Ms. Laurel Meeks. Would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Laurel Meeks.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy as Director of Energy Storage Development.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared 13 pages of direct testimony pre-filed with the Commission on October 24th, 2023?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions that appear in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would ask that Ms. Meeks' pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Meeks will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And Ms. Meeks, did you also prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please present your summary at this time?
My name is Laurel Meeks, and I am the Director of Energy Storage Development. My testimony supports the company's cost benchmarking, planning, and proposed execution of standalone battery energy storage resources as detailed in the 2023 IRP. I begin my direct testimony by explaining the role of battery energy storage in the Carolinas' changing energy landscape. Standalone battery energy storage systems are expected to play a critical role in ensuring that system balancing and reliability requirements are met. This is especially true as the companies continue to integrate solar and other variable energy generating renewables, transition away from aging coal generation, and meet growing needs for capacity and energy required to support continued economic development success in South Carolina, at a time when customers are also requesting increasingly clean and reliable power. I also describe the ongoing and future project development activities required in the near-term action period, 2023 through 2026, for commercial operation of those resources by 2031. I explain the company's risk management around battery supply and the company's plan regarding siting standalone storage to diversify the technology suite and maximize cost effectiveness. Duke Energy has and will continue to strategically site standalone battery energy storage to minimize cost and maximize value for the customer. As a part of this strategy, the companies are focused on siting in locations where standalone storage may offer benefits across the production, transmission, or distribution systems, or where existing land and infrastructure are reutilized. I conclude my direct testimony by providing an overview of current standalone storage projects under development in the company's service territories and the company's procurement frameworks established to ensure sufficient supply of battery materials. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you. Chair Powers, at this time, Ms. Meeks and Mr. LaRoche are available from questions from the parties as well as the commission.
Thank you very much. First, we go to Sierra Club. Ms. Jaffe.
No questions from Sierra Club.
All right. CCL, SACE, Upstate Forever, and Vote Solar.
No questions.
All right. Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association, Mr. Burns.
No questions at this time for SACEBA.
Thank you very much.
Correct.
Thank you.
That's correct. Thank you.
Walmart,
No questions.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Will reserve for rebuttal.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, any questions or reserve the questions? We will reserve the questioning. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask that these witnesses be excused for the time being.
They may be excused.
Thank you, Chair Powers. The companies would call Dewey Samuel Roberts to the stand, please. He's appearing virtually this morning.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir. Good morning.
If you would, please raise your right hand and let me swear you in. Do you solemnly affirm or swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Your witness.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Roberts.
Good morning.
Would you please state your full name and business address for the record?
Yes, my name is Dewey Samuel Roberts II. I go by Sammy. And my business address is 3401 Hillsborough Street in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And by whom are you employed in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corporation as General Manager of Grid and Operations Planning.
Thank you. And did you prepare 33 pages of pre-filed direct testimony filed with the Commission on October 24th, 2023?
I did.
And if I asked you this, do you have any changes or corrections to that pre-filed direct testimony at this time?
I do not.
All right. And if I asked you the same questions today that were presented in your pre-filed direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Thank you. Chair Powers, I'd ask that Mr. Roberts' pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Roberts will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. And he did not have any direct exhibits, but he did have some supplemental testimony, so I'll move to that. Mr. Roberts, did you prepare 10 pages of supplemental direct testimony pre-filed with the Commission on May 3rd of 2024?
I did.
And do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed supplemental direct testimony at this time?
I did not.
And if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed supplemental direct testimony, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Thank you. Chair Powers, I would ask that Mr. Roberts' pre-filed supplemental direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed supplemental direct testimony of Mr. Roberts will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, did you prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct and supplemental testimony to present to the commission?
I did.
Can you please present it at this time?
Yes, I'll be glad to. My direct testimony explains that executing the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan requires prudent planning of Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress transmission systems to retire coal-fired generation and to interconnect new supply-side resources while maintaining or improving power system reliability for customers. Safely and efficiently interconnecting new supply-side resources to the transmission grid is critical to successfully managing the generation fleet transition presented in the company's 2023 IRP. My direct testimony also sponsors Appendix L, Transmission System Planning and Grid Transformation to the IRP, which provides a detailed overview of the company's transmission planning process and the role of transmission in the plan. My direct testimony and Appendix L also update the Commission on the company's progress on transmission planning processes, strategic transmission planning, interconnection processes, and utilization of the generation replacement process that was accepted by FERC in September of 2022. Duke Energy is an industry leader in its robust transmission planning and efficient generator interconnection practices, and the companies are using these processes to enable the coal unit retirements and bring on new generation facilities identified as part of the company's most reasonable, least cost resource plan to serve our customers in South Carolina. Finally, my testimony addresses how the companies are proactively planning to meet the strategic transmission needs for South Carolina, including highlighting the importance of addressing system constraints through the Red Zone Expansion Plan projects to efficiently interconnect new generation in high solar viability areas, ensure power supply reliability, and support future economic development load growth in the state. The proactive transmission investments discussed in my direct testimony will play a key role in the company's execution of the 2023 IRP and continued pursuit of maintaining or improving power system reliability for customers. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Would you please present your supplemental direct testimony summary?
Yes. My supplemental direct testimony provides cost-benefit analysis and additional support for the Red Zone Expansion Plan projects presented in my initial direct testimony, and also identifies one additional planned Red Zone Expansion Plan project. I explain how planning and constructing these additional local transmission projects provide value to the system in excess of their cost, and why they are needed and beneficial to all customers to reliably execute the 2023 IRP. The cost-benefit analysis is focused solely on reliability and resilience benefits to the system and does not ascribe value to carbon emissions reductions. The additional project I present is a rebuild of the 40-mile Lee-Milburnie 230 kV line. The 2022 DEP Phase 1 DICES study results, the 2023 DEP Phase 1 DICES study results, and the results of the 2023 CTPC Public Policy Study presented at the March 22nd, 2024 Transmission Advisory Group Stakeholder Meeting all indicate that the Lee-Milburnie rebuild project is necessary to reliably integrate solar paired with storage and standalone batteries within the DEP East Balancing Authority area. The cost-benefit analysis results for the Lee-Milburnie rebuild project show a benefit-to-cost ratio of 22 using the asset replacement value model, while all red zone projects have benefits that are at least 4 times cost. These cost-benefit analysis results indicate great transmission system reliability and resiliency value for the residential, commercial, industrial, and wholesale customers served directly by these transmission projects, as well as the added system reliability benefits for customers not directly served. Finally, my supplemental direct testimony updates the Commission on the company's Attachment N-1 filing with FERC proposing more robust stakeholder engagement and requesting approval to implement a multi-value strategic transmission study and planning process. On March 12, 2024, FERC approved the company's proposed revisions to Attachment N-1. This concludes the summary of my supplemental direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Chair, Mr. Roberts is available for cross-examination by the parties and questions from the Commission.
Thank you, sir. Sierra Club, any questions?
No questions from Sierra Club. Thank you.
CCL, SACE,
No questions.
Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
Chair Powers, no question for SECEBA at this time.
Thank you very much. Walmart,
No questions.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Over as will reserve to rebuttal.
Thank you very much. The witness is excused.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Appreciate that. The companies would now call John Verderami and Daniel Donashad to the witness stand, please.
Good morning. Mr. Verderami, if you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. If you'll raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. Mr. Verderami, would you please state your full name for the record?
John Verderami.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy, and I serve in the role as Vice President of the Fuels and Systems Optimization Group.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 14 pages of pre-filed direct testimony that were filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony at this
I don't.
time? If I were to ask you the same questions in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Thanks. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd move Mr. Verderami's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. Verderami, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Verderami, did you also prepare a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
I did.
Would you please share that with the Commission at this time?
Absolutely. Good morning. In my direct testimony, I explained the changing energy landscape as it relates to the important role that dispatchable generation will play in executing a reliable, least cost, and least risk energy transition in the Carolinas. I update the Commission on the company's concerns for long-term viability of reliable, cost-effective coal generation and their efforts to ensure reliable coal supply through the company's anticipated coal retirement timelines. Of most immediate concern to the companies is the reduction in Central Appalachian thermal coal production. When viewed holistically, the magnitude of the volatility of coal demand continues to be larger than the coal transportation supply chain can effectively support, and the companies expect that degree of volatility to continue and perhaps worsen as more U.S. coal producers accelerate their transition away from coal-fired generation. From a commodity perspective, the reduction in the demand for coal is being driven by economics and increasing environmental regulation risk. Looking forward, the anticipated reduction in producers, either through industry consolidation or outright mine closures, is expected to result in higher supplier concentrations, which will drive higher costs and increase supply risk. Coal producers are also struggling with structural shifts in investment capital allocations away from coal, as well as declining workforce that the industry is finding difficult to replace. And the companies expect continued issues with the ability of the railroads to respond timely to changing demand, along with limited availability of coal car transportation equipment to continue, all of which increases the risk of reliable supply and higher customer costs. As intermittent resource generation penetration increases, fast ramping and cycling units will be required to meet the company's operational needs. Coal facilities with minimum ramp times of 24 hours or more, coupled with their inability to quickly cycle on and off due to their minimum run times, are simply not capable of meeting these operating requirements. An additional challenge affecting the company's ability to maintain an aging coal fleet is the ability to obtain materials, like critical plant parts, in a timely manner and secure equipment that is becoming obsolete as companies no longer manufacture parts for coal plants. Reliability of the system, as supported by these aging coal facilities, will remain paramount as we replace before retire. In my direct testimony, I also discussed the company's natural gas transportation capacity and supply needs and procurement strategy in support of additional dispatchable natural gas generation as the companies retire aging coal plants over the next decade. The company's natural gas supply strategy is critical to ensuring adequate supply for economic development growth, preserving reliability, and supporting the operational flexibility of the generation fleet. As the company's aging coal facilities retire, the companies must increase the fuel security of natural gas to have a reliable supply to meet the needs of the combined fleet during peak periods. The electric utility industry is undergoing a significant transition through the retirement of coal units and moving towards increasingly clean resources. In connection with this transformation of the generation resource mix, the companies must bring into service enough diverse and equally reliable resources to keep pace with and to accommodate the growth needs of South Carolina's businesses and economies, while maintaining and improving the reliability of the grid at all times, including during extreme weather periods. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Verderame. Mr. Donashad, would you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Daniel Donashad.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Employed by Duke Energy Carolinas as the General Manager of Generation Execution and Technologies.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 12 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the Commission in this proceeding?
I did.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
The only change I would have is I had a title change, and so my the old title was the GM of Fleet Transition Strategy, and my new title was the GM of Generation Execution and Technologies.
Aside from that change, if I were to ask you the same questions in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
They would.
Chair Powers, I move at this time that Mr. Donashad's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. Donashad, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Donashad, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please share that with the Commission at this time?
Yes. My direct testimony is intended to support and highlight key areas in Chapter 4, Execution Plan, related to new hydrogen-capable natural gas assets and Appendix K, natural gas, low-carbon fuels, and hydrogen, of the resource plan that explain the important role that dispatchable generation will play in executing a reliable, least cost, and least risk energy transition in the Carolinas. I described the company's planned near and intermediate term actions for increasing operational flexibility of the company's existing natural gas generation fleet, adding additional dispatchable natural gas generation as the companies retire aging coal units over the next decade. I also discussed the role of hydrogen resources in both near and intermediate term action plans. My testimony further supports Appendix K, where the companies describe the planning considerations underway for the addition of dispatchable, hydrogen-capable natural gas generation resources. Finally, my testimony provides additional background on the company's plans for new natural gas generation assets, as well as steps taken to continue evaluating the role of hydrogen as a future generation fuel for the company's planned new dispatchable gas assets. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Donashad. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Verderame and Mr. Donashad are now available for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you very much. Any questions from Sierra Club?
No questions, thank you.
CCL says Upstate Forever, vote solar.
Good morning. My name is Emma Clancy and I represent CCL et al. Mr. Verderame, I have some questions for you.
Morning.
Morning. Now, your testimony and Appendix F describes challenges facing the coal industry. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. In preparing the IRP, I assume you consulted with the modeling team and Astrape about coal operation challenges. Is that correct?
I gave them my input. Yes.
Now, I'd like to dig into a few of the issues that you raised in your testimony and you just mentioned in your summary and discuss how that impacts Duke's coal operations. So to begin, you highlight the financial instability of coal suppliers. Now that can drive up prices, but it can also impact fuel availability to run the plants, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And now you also discussed disruptions in rail service, which is the only way coal is delivered, and that's also increasing. Is that right?
So I wouldn't describe them as disruptions. My testimony is more around the declining capital allocation of the railroads to coal as a product. And so really how that manifests itself for the company is the inability for the railroads to respond to a change in demand more than disruptions.
Okay. So but it does increase the complications of getting coal to the plants.
It does, as coal is less of an important component of the railroad's business. Yes, I think that complicates the supply chain.
Okay. Now, you also discussed how it's becoming more difficult to find critical replacement parts to run a coal plant as companies are no longer manufacturing those parts. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so when parts can't be replaced quickly or even within a reasonable time frame, this could lead to extended outages. Is that right?
I think that's the implication, yes.
Mm-hmm. And those extended outages can impact reliability during peak demand events, correct?
Yes.
Now, do you recall that ORS issued a report on Duke's outages during Winter Storm Elliott?
I do.
And do you also recall that that report describes how prior to Winter Storm Elliott, there were more than 2 gigawatts of forced outages, which made it more difficult to serve load going into that event?
Yes.
And isn't it true that some of those outages and derates, like for example, the outage at Marshall Unit 1, I believe, were due to out-of-stock parts, long lead times for replacements, or other equipment delivery issues?
I have to say I can't exactly remember the cause of the outage at Marshall.
Okay. Well, could you please just quickly read this highlighted portion then? Can you see that clearly?
I can.
Okay. Just the highlighted portion would be great.
Okay.
So again,
I recall now.
You recall now. So you would agree that some of those outages were due to replacement parts being delayed, correct?
I think Marshall is particularly an interesting example because those boiler feed pumps at Marshall 1 and 2, I think, are the only 2 of their kind currently in operation in the United States.
Okay. Thank you. Now, so to that end, these challenges you describe, they've already impacted the reliability of Duke's fleet. Isn't that right?
So I think witness Holman can speak to the impacts and the mitigations we've made around maintaining the fleet as it as it exists and as it develops. My testimony is more around more tries to speak to the impacts of continuing to rely on coal for too long, too much coal for too long into the 30s.
Okay. Well, you do agree, though, that these extended outages can impact reliability, right?
Yeah, I agree.
And that's a risk of not being able to obtain these replacement parts, correct?
Yes.
And we saw
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
I'm
Wells.
having trouble hearing the witness. I know he wants to look at the attorney when he's answering, but could he please speak into the microphone? Because I'm having a little difficulty.
And you can move the microphone.
Yeah.
I tried to, okay. there
It
we
doesn't
go,
move a whole
okay.
lot, but.
Oh, it's stuck.
No.
Okay.
I apologize for interrupting, but thank you.
No, my apologies.
No, that's fine. That is actually a good point to change gears. I'd like to now discuss some of the regulatory challenges facing coal. Now, are you aware that in May of this year, the EPA finalized 2 rules that impact Duke's coal fleet?
I am.
And the first is the final rule under Section 111 of the Clean Air Act, under which there are several pathways for existing coal units, correct?
There are, and if I may, I'd like to ask.
Yes,
my-
and please jump in. I meant to say that. I
Witness
understand.
Stanislaw is more
Yes.
prepared to
I
speak.
know you submitted some testimony on that as well, so please also jump in. So
Okay.
So am I correct that at a very high and simplified level, those pathways for coal units include retire by 2032, if the unit retires after 2032 but before 2039, switch the unit to co-fire gas with an emissions limitation, and then if the unit retires after 2039, install carbon capture and sequestration by 2032. Is that right?
Yes, and then the other avenue would be you could convert to a gas steam unit by 2030.
By 2030,
Yeah.
it would be convert 100%, correct?
That's right.
That's
Correct.
the other, okay. Now, Duke doesn't think it's feasible to install carbon capture by 2032, correct?
Not in the Carolinas.
Okay. So that essentially leaves, apart from converting 100% to gas, that essentially leaves 2 paths for coal units under 111, retirement by 2032 or co-firing by 2030, correct?
Yes, there also is a remaining useful life provision as well.
Right. The state plan, which won't be finalized for several years, will allow some flexibility and variances, but that is subject to EPA approval, correct?
Right. We would work through the state agencies and then they would submit to EPA. So correct.
And none of those fairly narrow exceptions or variances are guaranteed. Isn't that right?
I don't believe so. I think it's at EPA's discretion.
Right. So again, assuming Duke plans ahead to meet the current federal emissions rules, there are essentially 2 paths for coal units. 2030 gas or 2032 retirement. Is that right?
Right. Yes. And then, we have 8 of our coal units already co-fired 40% or more. So they're in a good position.
Right. Now, before we get on to the retirement dates, I just want to touch on the second rule finalized in May, and that's a supplemental effluent limitation guidelines rule, or the 2024 ELG update, we can call it. Are you all aware of that?
I'm aware of it. I'm not very involved with all the fine details of it.
Okay, well, at a high level, are you aware that it requires coal units to have 0 discharge for 3 waste streams as soon as possible, but no later than December 2029 unless the unit retires by 2034?
Yeah, I think generally that's correct. I don't have ELG in my testimony or anything.
Subject to check based on your experience. And installing treatment technology can impose significant additional costs at any unit that retires after 2034, correct?
I believe so. I mean, I would just say that ELG is complicated. It's been around for a while, and the EPA continues to change the regulations there. I believe that our Carolinas coal fleet, they're actually in a pretty good position. So I don't have all the details here today. It's not in my testimony, but I think generally working with the environmental team, I think we're in a pretty good space.
Okay. And I did want to now move on to the retirement timeline that Duke has in P3 fall base. So I've highlighted it there. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Now, As we discussed earlier, one option is for coal units to convert to fire 100% gas by 2030, and that's what's going on with Cliffside 6, correct?
Yeah, Cliffside 6 already has 100% capability, and so
It has a capability, but it's planned to be converted by 2036, though Duke is evaluating converting it by 2030. Is that right?
yes, if the 111 rule stands, we would convert that to a gas steam, technically a gas steam unit. Although it already has that capability, you just would not be able to burn coal after 2030.
Well, the 111 rule is a final EPA rule that is in effect currently, correct?
It is currently in effect. It's being litigated, but it's in effect. Yes.
But there's no certainty from litigation, is there?
I don't believe there is.
Yes. Now, but looking at those other dates, you would agree that most units retire by 2032, which avoids the requirements we discussed under 111 and the ELG rule, correct?
Yeah, I mean, just looking, I'm not going to talk about ELG necessarily, like I said. I'm not really prepared for all that. But yeah, looking at the dates, I mean, yes, most of the units, showing retirement dates of 2030, 32 or earlier, although, Roxborough 2 and 3 are later. Blues Creek is later.
And Blues Creek, you're anticipating my next question. Blues Creek retires later, but those units do have co-firing capabilities that can be taken advantage of to meet the 2030 deadline, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, those are 50% co-fired units.
So that really just leaves the Roxborough units retiring in 2034 out of compliance since they don't have co-firing capabilities, right?
That's correct. They do not, and so those are units that we would talk with the air agency about using the rule off the remaining useful life and trying to allow us to run them longer versus spending a lot of money and then retiring them 2 years later.
Well, isn't it also true that Duke has evaluated in its 111 analysis switching those dates with the Marshall units, which do have co-firing capabilities?
Yeah, that's something that's being considered.
Okay, so Duke is evaluating a compliance pathway.
Well, yeah, with any rule, we would always evaluate compliance pathways.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just to say, Duke's coal retirement plan is largely in compliance with these recent rules, or at least capable of getting there. Isn't that right?
I would agree with that.
But any delays, even minor ones, do risk putting additional units out of compliance with Section 11 and the ELG rules. Isn't that right?
Restate that question, please.
Yes, any delay, even minor ones, do increase the risk of putting additional units out of compliance with these recent federal rules.
I mean, if you were doing a project for compliance and it was delayed, then yes, you would.
Yes.
You would have a higher risk of not meeting the date.
Yes. So just to put a finer point on that, Cliffside 5 and Mayo 1 are scheduled to retire in 2031. But if those dates were delayed, they would need to co-fire with gas, right?
We could delay 1 year.
Okay. Well,
without having to do anything.
You could delay 1 year without having to do anything?
Yeah, because you can get to 2032.
To 2030, okay. Yes.
For Mayo, Cliffside 5 already is co-fired, so I could run that till 2039.
Okay, but just to say these dates are running up against the deadlines, you would agree, correct?
Well, we talked about the different deadlines and then the different retirement dates here. So again, I think we're in a good position on 111 if it remains intact.
And if Duke's coal retirement plan remains in place, correct?
Correct.
And just as an aside, Mayo is one of the most expensive units to operate, isn't that right? So there's other benefits to retiring these units besides the federal requirements. I discussed those earlier with Mr. Verderame, correct?
I mean, I think witness Quinto would be able to talk more about the economics of the units. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Verderame, do you have anything to add? I know we discussed about, the cost and risk of coal operations.
Oh, no. No, I don't.
Okay. Well, since it's 2020 and 2022 IRPs, Duke has delayed retirement dates at Allen, Cliffside, Mayo, and Roxborough, correct?
That sounds right. I mean, so we as we're working through things, as load changes and reserve margins change, we have to be flexible. And so, we check and adjust. And so it's not uncommon for during IRPs that we would have various changes, including coal retirement dates.
Okay, but yes, there have been some retirement delays compared to those earlier IRPs.
Yes, I would think so.
Okay, but you would agree based on this discussion that the stakes are getting higher when it comes to sticking with planned retirement dates in terms of the coal industry and some of the federal requirements that are coming down.
Yeah, I mean, there are increasing regulations on the coal units. Yeah, between MATS and ELG and 111.
Okay, and wouldn't you agree that allowing coal retirements past 2036 is really out of step with these regulatory requirements, not to mention some of the reliability risks we discussed earlier?
Well, I guess with 111, we could technically run the coal-fired units till 39, but like witness Verderami said, I mean, there are pressures on the coal units outside of just compliance.
Okay, well, Duke didn't look at coal retirements past 2036. So I'm saying, do you think that's consistent with the environment that we're in and that we've just been discussing?
Yes, I think it's consistent.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your time. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Carolina Clean Energy Business Association, any questions?
Chair Powers, we have no questions at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Walmart.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. ORS.
We will reserve for rebuttal. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, reserving questions. We will do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd ask that these witnesses please be excused.
Witnesses may be excused. Thank you, gentlemen.
Chair Powers, we have a single piece of direct testimony that remains. Mr. Capps was flagged in our conflict letter filed for today. We are working to get him in front of a computer. In other words, we're working on curing that conflict so that we can get him up in front of this commission. But there are two alternatives. One, as we see it, subject, of course, to the chair's pleasure. We would request either that another party begin to put up their direct case, and we would waive anything and be willing to do that. In the alternative, we would ask permission to file a verification for Mr. Capps' direct testimony and just have it stipulated into the record. But headline is that we are working to get him available virtually, but he is not quite there yet. Well, I guess the third alternative, Chair, is that we could take a brief break and work on getting him in front of a computer, just whichever. He needs about 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, it's early. Let's come back at 10:45, and y'all figure out where we're going.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. We're adjourned. We are back on the record on the case, the IRP case, Duke Energy Progress, Duke Energy Carolinas, dockets number 2023-8E and 2023-10E. Mr. Welborn, what can you report?
Chair Powers, Mr. Stephen Capps is available to testify, and we'll call him next to the stand.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, first, all commissioners are present and all parties are present, so we are ready to proceed. Mr. Capps?
Yes, sir.
Would you please raise your right hand and to be sworn? Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
Thank you very much. Your witness.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to say that I think Mr. Capps' background is very appropriate for his testimony.
I didn't notice.
I'd like to say we planned that, but we had to move a lot here. Good morning, Mr. Capps. Will you please state your full name for the record?
My name is Stephen D. Capps.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corporation as Senior Vice President of Nuclear Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Capps. And can you try to get closer to your screen to help out the court reporter, please? Appreciate that. Did you prepare or cause to be prepared 10 pages of direct testimony that were pre-filed with the commission in this proceeding?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any changes or corrections to your testimony?
No, sir.
If I asked you the same questions that appeared in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that Mr. Capps' pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony, Mr. Capps, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Capps, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony for the commission?
Yes, sir, I have.
Would you please read that at this time?
Yes, sir. In my direct testimony, I explained the key themes and issues related to the generation expansion of Duke Energy's existing nuclear fleet and the development of advanced nuclear generation technologies. Duke Energy has a strong decades-long history of operating nuclear plants to the benefit of our Carolinas customers, and both the current nuclear fleet and advanced nuclear generation will play a key role in our obligation to provide safe, reliable, and affordable power to customers in the future. For the existing nuclear fleet, we are pursuing subsequent license renewal for all nuclear stations. This serves as a foundational component, providing safe, reliable, and cost-effective baseload generation to the Carolinas. We have also identified opportunities to increase the output for some of the existing nuclear units through power uprates, measurement uncertainty recapture projects, and converting 5 units from an 18-month fuel cycle to a 24-month fuel cycle. I further highlight the company's near-term action plan for new nuclear resources to support the development and deployment of Duke Energy's first small modular reactors. An early site permit application for the Blues Creek site is in progress, and the potential reactor technologies are under assessment and review. These activities are the first steps that will result in an estimated 600 megawatts of additional new nuclear generation being available by 2035. This concludes my direct testimony summary.
Thank you, Mr. Capps. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Capps is now available for questions from council and the commission.
Thank you very much. Questions, Sierra Club, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
CCL, say upstate forever, vote solar.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Carolinas Clean Energy Business Association.
Chair Powers, so CB has no questions at this time.
Thank you very much. Walmart.
No questions.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
ORS reserves to rebuttal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Commissioners also will reserve for rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask that Mr. Capps be excused, and that concludes the company's direct case.
All right, Mr. Capps, you may step down.
Thank you, sir.
I believe we've worked out that we're going to Walmart next. Is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Our witness is getting on now, so I will go
Mr.
up
Chair?
here.
This is John Burns remotely.
Yes, sir, Mr. Burns.
I just wanted you to know, we have, as you ordered yesterday, that we have set our witnesses, Mr. Hamilton and Mr. Haggerty, for a time certain on Thursday, date certain.
Okay.
I just wanted you to know, Mr. Chair, that we are working to see if there's any possibility of them being available later tomorrow afternoon, but we don't have any answers to that yet. But I did want you to know we were trying to move things if possible.
Well, thank you, Mr. Burns. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Is she here? Ms. Perry?
Yes, I'm on. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
All right, hold on just a second. All right, how about that?
That's
Yep,
much
we can
better.
see you.
Ms. Perry, could you raise your right hand for me, please? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. And is she here for direct or direct answer rebuttal?
Just direct.
All right, thank you very much. You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Perry, can you please state your full name and business address for the record?
Yes, it's Lisa V. Perry, 2608 Southeast J Street, Bentonville, Arkansas, 72718.
And for whom do you work and in what position?
I work for Walmart and I am Director, Utility Partnerships Regulatory.
Have you testified before this commission before?
Yes, I have.
Ms. Perry, could you get a little closer to your microphone so we could hear you just a little bit better?
Sure. Is that better?
That's
Yes.
great. Thank you.
Did you cause to be prepared for dockets 2023 8E and 2023 10E pre-filed direct testimony dated July 1st, 2024, consisting of 24 pages?
Yes.
And do you have any additions, updates, or corrections to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I were to ask you the same questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
I move that the commission accept Ms. Perry's pre-filed direct testimony into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Ms. Perry will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you. Ms. Perry, did you also cause to be prepared for dockets 2023 8E and 2023 10E, one exhibit to your pre-filed direct testimony identified as LVP1, which is your CV consisting of 16 pages?
Yes.
Do you have any additions, updates, or corrections to exhibit LVP1 to your pre-filed direct testimony?
No, I do not.
I further move that this commission accept Ms. Perry's exhibit LVP1 to her pre-filed direct testimony as the next hearing exhibit.
The pre-filed exhibit of witness Perry identified as LVP1 is marked for identification and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 10.
Thank you. Ms. Perry, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please read that for us now?
Good morning, Commissioners. The Duke Energy Companies are seeking approval of a supplemental integrated resource plan, which was developed based on Act 62 of 2019 and previous IRP orders. This IRP applies to both North and South Carolina with state-specific chapters addressing their respective legal requirements. It outlines necessary supply and demand-side resources to maintain reliable service over a 15-year planning horizon, being 2024 to 2038, by presenting 3 energy transition planning pathways aimed at achieving carbon neutrality by 2050. These pathways involve different combinations of near-term resources, long lead resources, and demand-side programs to reduce the overall energy challenge. The companies conducted a supplemental planning analysis identifying additional resource needs for 2024 to 2026, which includes solar, batteries, and wind resources. Economic growth has necessitated updates to their load forecast and modeling. The companies also aim to meet North Carolina's House Bill 951 requirement of reducing carbon emissions by 70% by 2030 and reaching carbon neutrality by 2050. Walmart, like other companies, has aggressive sustainability goals, and its operations in North and South Carolina rely on the company's decarbonization efforts. In addition to the company's investment in cleaner resources, Walmart also recognizes the importance of customer-driven programs that call for more innovation in leveraging customer resources, such as on-site generation and community solar, to diversify the energy mix. It is this type of collaboration that supports Walmart's recommendation to the Commission to require the companies to collaborate with stakeholders, including programs that will help develop at least 600 megawatts of customer-sited generation in the event that some company-owned resources will not come online as anticipated, such as the nascent small-scale nuclear technology. Finally, while reliability is critical to Walmart, it is equally important to consider the rising cost of electricity and the financial impact on customers when evaluating proposals like the company's request to increase the winter reserve margin from 17% to 22%. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Perry is available for cross-examination by the parties and by the commission.
Thank you very much. First, we'll go to the company, Duke Energy. Any questions?
No questions, Chairman.
All right. Sierra Club,
No questions. Thank you.
CCL SACE.
No questions.
All right. Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association.
No questions, but thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions.
All right. Commissioners. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good morning, Ms. Perry. It's really morning where you are, or marginally a little bit more morning.
Yes, an hour or more morning. Good morning.
Right. Have you seen Mr. Duff's rebuttal testimony?
I have. Yes.
Okay. He talked some about already leveraging customer resources through approved tariffs. How would you respond to that?
You know, I agree. I agree in part. Let me restate that. Walmart does support the existing tariffs that are in place, and certainly my recommendation.
Can you get a little bit closer to your mic again?
Yes.
Okay.
I can. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes. Walmart supports the current tariffs that are in place, and my recommendation is certainly not a judgment or indictment of those tariffs. It really more is recognizing the fact that this industry is changing rapidly. And I think the role that customers play, especially larger customers like Walmart, who are investing in different types of technologies, is also changing, and just ensuring that these conversations continue and that these type of programs and other type of programs continue to be developed to keep up with the changing technology and changing customer involvement.
And does Walmart opt out of those programs?
So for energy efficiency programs, we do opt out. For some of the other renewable programs, we have traditionally not participated in, but I know, like, for example, GSA has been modified, and so we are looking at participating in some of those.
Thank you. I'm just looking at what I want to ask next. Maybe related to that, would you amplify, do you have anything else to add to the limiting factors that make Walmart's participation in the company's sponsored DSM programs? Can you talk more about what those limiting factors are?
So the ones that we opt out of,
right.
Energy efficiency programs, you know, honestly, the cost to participate in the program is greater than the benefit, and Walmart already invests in energy efficiency for its facilities regardless. So for example, making our buildings more energy efficient, whether it's lighting or HVAC system. And so it's economically better for us to just do that independently, opt out and not receive an incentive, than to pay to participate in the program and receive an incentive.
Do you ever, when you look at the numbers, the energy efficiency ratings nationally, and look at, I'm sure you're in all states, do you wish that you could see Walmart's energy efficiency efforts reflected in those numbers? This is an aside.
Yeah, and that's a great question. I mean, certainly, we're gonna invest in this regardless because of our sustainability goals, which include to be carbon free by 2040. But yes, I mean, to the extent that our efforts can be recognized, and I think also as being an example for other companies, I mean, certainly that would be a positive.
Do you see any way that might happen in time?
I'm not sure of the answer to that, to be honest with you.
I understand. I wish that it could, with all kinds of privacy, confidential information protected. Okay. There was some testimony about, I think the Public Service Commission kind of auditing and examining public utilities. And I just wanted to see if you're aware of the role in South Carolina of the Office of Regulatory Staff.
As far as auditing utilities, I am generally aware of it, but I don't know any of the specifics.
Okay. Would you accept that the Commission does not have any statutory authority to inspect, audit, or examine public utilities per our state code?
Yeah, I mean, I accept that as true.
Okay. And therefore, we have to make our decision based on the record that's before us.
I understand, yes.
Okay. I guess the verbiage that you used was a thorough review of the company's proposal to raise their reserve margin. What, given our role, what is that thorough review?
And that's interesting. My point was to really, and I know that commissions, I would seek to do this anyway, but my really point of pointing this out was, over the last certainly couple of years, as a participant in commissions and dockets across the United States, we're seeing the increase of the cost of electricity just going up quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And projects that used to be in the millions, you're now seeing in the billions. And just recognizing that, yes, reliability is certainly very important, but also just making the point that there is a need to balance that with affordability. And so the review is just, obviously within the statutory limitations of the commission to ensure that when they're asking for something like increasing a reserve margin by 5%, that it is, necessary to do so in order to preserve the reliability of the system.
And do you have any further testimony that would help us in that regard?
Oh, as far as addressing what aspect of it?
The 5-point increase in the reserve margin.
No, not anything other than what I put in my testimony, because the intent really was just to not make a specific recommendation, but really just to point the commission to the fact that as a customer, we are also concerned about the affordability aspect.
I understand. Duke has some testimony that says that customer-sited generation would not adequately meet the demand from a new supplemental load forecast. From Walmart's perspective, do you have any experience to share with us?
Well, I know that we, in other states, are starting to invest in community solar, which is smaller scale solar. But really just working with other utilities to find ways where we can bring system resources to the company. And yeah, you know, I understand it's going to be a mix of solutions. My point is just that using customer investments and assets could be part of that solution. You know, utilities talk about taking the all of the above approach, and it's saying, okay, how can we put as many tools in that toolbox so that there is this diverse mix of options for the utility on both the demand side and the supply side. And so when Duke says that, I mean, to me, I'd like to have a conversation with him about that, because maybe there are some things that we can do. It's really just being creative and just thinking differently than maybe we've thought in the past about the utility customer kind of relationship.
Do you participate in their stakeholder programs?
Yes, we do.
And can you elaborate on, when you talk about shrinking the challenge of energy requirements, what you mean?
Well, shrinking the challenge is really the demand side. And of course, somewhat it's going to be through energy efficiency. We've also participated in programs where we've been able to provide backup generation that is a grid resource during normal grid operations. But if the grid goes down, then it can be used by the customer. And so just really ways to reduce the usage of electricity. So with the goal of not needing to build as much generation because the demand is lower.
Something you said made me think about virtual power plants. Do you operate in states where you have a virtual power plant?
We are starting to look at those, and certainly like microgridding and just using smaller generation type resources, and maybe even coupled with some demand response programs. Right? Yes. So I wouldn't say directly. I don't believe we do right now, but that is something that we are pursuing.
So would it be fair to characterize that opportunity as nascent from Walmart's engagement perspective?
Yes, I think that's fair.
And you can give it another term. That's just what came to my mind.
Well, this is all, I think, so new to a lot of us that, we're all trying to figure it out.
Which is why I asked the question. Because it's the only time I get to talk to you, so. So the Duke companies recently provided time of use rates, but as I'm saying this, I'm thinking those are residential. But do you have companies that participate using time of use rates? Do you have?
We're on time of use rate.
Okay.
Right. I was just going to say, yes, we are on time of use rates in a lot of different service territories.
And are you in South Carolina?
That is a good question. I don't know for sure, but I can certainly find out.
What's the impact of your stores being on time of use rates?
It depends on how the time of use rates are structured. If they're structured properly, then we will be able to manage our demand and our usage within that structure. So basically price signaling, getting us to use less electricity during a certain period of time. And we can do that through either adjusting our building controls or even relying upon a backup generator to provide electricity to us in lieu of the company. basically what's called peak shaving.
Right, right. Do you have experience with some of the rural cooperatives and time of use rates?
I'm not sure. I know, obviously, a lot of our stores are served by cooperatives. But I would imagine that the time of use rate for a cooperative would probably affect us in the same way for an IOU. It's just really how the time of use rate is structured.
Ms. Perry, I may come back to you with more questions, but I'm going to take a break and give another commissioner a chance to talk with you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Belson.
Good morning, Ms. Perry. It's good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Good morning.
Ms. Perry, I just want to flesh out a little bit about your recommendations regarding customer-sited generation assets. You've recommended that the commission require a collaborative with stakeholders. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what do you envision from that? Could you flesh that for me? Flesh that out a little bit for me.
Yes, certainly. And I know that there are already stakeholder processes in place, but it's really just having a platform where interested customers and other stakeholders can have a conversation with the company to help, or basically the word comes to mind is brainstorm ways that customers can be more involved in the solution, so that we're not just bringing this additional load, but we can also bring hopefully some either generation type resources or shrinking the challenge on the demand side to help serve that additional load that we're bringing.
And what type of customers would be involved in this? I mean, something like Walmart, but what are some other type customers that might be involved in such a collaborative?
It's hard for me to speak directly for other customers, but I know that there are other large companies that do have sustainability goals and have looked into, generation. So like the Microsofts of the world and the Googles and Facebooks and, larger companies like that.
When you mentioned the 600 megawatt of on-site customer generation, is that individual sites or is that cumulative, a bunch of different customers, or how? Tell me about that.
I was envisioning it more as cumulative.
Okay. I was thinking about that footprint that for an individual, I couldn't envision that, so I just needed to understand that a little bit more. And then you've asked or have a statement about 100 to require the companies within 120 days, I believe it was, to bring something to the commission on this issue. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you talk a little bit more about that recommendation?
Yes, and to be honest, 120 days is not a magic number. I decided to put a number in there because just to ensure that it has some sort of rails on it time-wise, and it's not something that they say, oh yes, we will do that, and then 2 years later, we still haven't done anything. But to be honest, the 120 days is not tied to anything specific.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your clarification on those points for me. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer. Commissioner Caston?
Good morning, Ms. Perry.
Good morning.
And I think questioning with Commissioner Carolee Williams, you'd mentioned that reliability was important.
Yes.
I think you mentioned it a couple of times, maybe I misheard you, that affordability was also important to Walmart. Were you thinking in terms of the 7 factors in the IRP statute there, or is that just something that came to mind? I mean,
As far as the reliability and affordability
yeah, yes, ma'am.
concepts, really, it did not come out of anything statutorily defined or driven. It really just is overall operationally is where my perspective is from.
Okay. Are they equally important to you? Is one more important than another as far as Walmart?
That is a great question. You know, and this is maybe more me, but personally, I think you have to put reliability just slightly ahead of affordability. But that's just from a commercial Walmart's perspective, and certainly not an individual customer's perspective.
All righty. Thank you. You in a warehouse? Is that your office or?
It actually is a warehouse that was repurposed into offices thanks to WeWorks.
I understand. I was wishing there was a camera there so I could see what was going on back there, but thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. Good morning, Ms. Perry. It's good to see you.
Good morning.
So I believe you mentioned that you had participated in stakeholder groups with the companies. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Has there been any discussion that you're aware of in the stakeholder groups in connection with the potential merger of the two companies?
That is a good question. I don't recall. I know that we have had conversations with the company about the merger. I just can't recall if it was through a stakeholder process or through individual conversations.
Okay. Do you believe that perhaps it would be wise for the commission to open a docket related to the merger discussions?
I think it would be a good idea. Yes.
All right. Appreciate your input. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Any further commissioner questions? Commissioner Williams, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience in letting me come back to you. You talked about affordability being important to Walmart, and I wanted to think some about the IRP portfolio and the importance of selecting one that represents least cost to customers. Is that important?
Yes, it is important.
And do you believe that one of the current portfolios is better than another?
You know, I can't say that. Honestly, for that, we really have deferred to the customer or to the utilities Duke's assessment of which one that they believe to be the least cost for customers. And I did not do an extensive analysis of each of them to really answer that question.
And do you think that modifications need to happen with regard to the portfolios, or is the answer the same?
No, I believe my answer is the same. Really more, it's just about finding solutions going forward, you know, maybe for the next IRP.
Will you talk more about why you feel that way?
I feel as far as like modifications to the current versus really just working towards the future. In part, like I said, you know, a lot of times, like with the utilities resource planning, like Duke's resource planning, we don't often go through and scrutinize that because they have the experts, they have the tools to analyze all the data to try to come up with what is the best cost and least cost solution for customers. And having that already done, we typically don't go in and try to reanalyze it or say they could have done this or that better. We just look at what it came up with and then say, well, I wonder if there's even more things that they can consider when they come back to the commission with an IRP that can include different options than what's in the current one. And to really flesh that out with the company, as opposed to us just doing sort of a one-sided analysis.
Thank you. Do you believe, I'm curious about your thoughts about cost of service studies and whether from your review of the IRP, that's something that we need to update for the Duke companies?
Update the cost of service study?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if it's necessary to adequately reflect the costs overall, and then certainly the cost for each customer class is their contribution to the cost, then that would seem to make sense.
Okay. In your direct testimony, you talk about Walmart having set goals and revised targets to achieve clean energy and carbon reduction. How would you categorize other companies like yours and those kind of goals? Do most have them? Do most not?
I think a lot of the larger companies do seem to have them. They may look a little different than ours as far as the timelines.
You said a lot?
I said, did I say a lot? I know that a lot of the larger companies do have them from my understanding. Although the timelines, may look a little bit different. And also our carbon reduction goal does not have offsets, where I believe other companies do have offsets in their goals.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams.
I have just a couple of follow-up
Any
questions.
redirect?
Yes, thank you. Just a few follow-up questions. Ms. Perry, you were asked by Commissioner Carolee Williams about community solar. And is it correct that Walmart is a participant in Duke Energy Florida's Clean Energy Connection program, which is a community solar program that is run by Duke Energy?
Yes, that is correct.
And you were also asked by Commissioner Williams regarding some renewable energy programs and energy efficiency programs. Is it correct that Walmart supported Duke Energy Carolinas and Duke Energy Progress's recent renewable energy docket and their Clean Energy Impact Program and the Renewable Choice Program?
Yes.
And I believe entered into some agreements with Duke or settlement agreements in those dockets related to those new programs. Is that right?
Yes, I believe that's right.
And finally, you were asked by Commissioner Thomas regarding the potential merger between the companies. Is it correct that Walmart was involved in the North Carolina CPIRP proceeding recently?
Yes, that is correct.
And do you recall that the issue of the merger of the companies did come up in that proceeding?
Yes.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eaton. Based upon the redirect, does any party have any recross or any cross? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would ask that if no one has any additional questions, that Ms. Perry be excused.
Ms. Perry, you are excused. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
Say CCL's my understanding, Ms. Rapani may be ready. Ms.
Thank you.
Rapani?
Oh, yeah.
Hello. Hey, would you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly affirm or swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clancy. She's your witness.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Dr. Rupani, please state your name for the record.
My name is Maria Rumpani.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am an independent consultant. I am the co-founder and managing director at IGLO Engineering Consulting.
And Dr. Rumpani, did you cause to be pre-filed in this docket on July 1st, 2024, direct testimony consisting of 111 pages?
Yes.
Certain pages of your direct testimony contained confidential information. Do you recall that a confidential version of your direct testimony was filed under seal with the Commission?
Yes.
And if the questions put to you in your direct testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
And did you also attach to your direct testimony one exhibit identified as Exhibit MR1?
Yes.
Was Exhibit MR1 prepared by you or under your direction?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I would move to have Dr. Rumpani's pre-filed direct testimony and exhibit entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, and with the confidential version of the testimony remaining under seal.
The pre-filed direct and confidential version of the testimony of Dr. Rumpani will be entered into the record as given orally under the stand. The pre-filed exhibit of witness Dr. Rumpani, identified as MR1, is marked for identification and will be placed in the record as exhibit number 11.
Dr. Rumpani, did you also cause to be pre-filed in this docket on August 30th, 2024, surrebuttal testimony consisting of 19 pages?
Yes.
Certain pages of your surrebuttal testimony contained confidential information. Do you recall that a confidential version of your surrebuttal testimony was filed under seal with the Commission?
Yes.
And if the questions put to you in your surrebuttal testimony were asked at the hearing today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I would move to have Dr. Rumpani's pre-filed surrebuttal testimony entered into the record as though given orally from the stand, with the confidential version of the testimony remaining under seal.
The pre-filed direct rebuttal testimony of Dr. Rumpani will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, as well as the confidential version, and will remain confidential as long as necessary.
Thank you. And Dr. Rumpani, you do not plan to return later in the rebuttal phase of this hearing, though you are available to be recalled, correct?
That is correct.
Now, I understand you have prepared a summary of your direct and surrebuttal testimony for the Commission. Please go ahead and present your summary.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Powers and members of the Commission. My name is Maria Rumpani, and the purpose of my testimony is to provide the Commission with directional input as to how the company's analysis and near-term action plan could be improved to protect ratepayers from unnecessary costs, risks, and environmental impacts. My review of Duke's resource planning analysis and alternative pathways is informed by my experience of 6 years reviewing resource plans across the U.S., including as the Technical Director at Strategy and Consulting, as an independent consultant, and currently also as a partner at Current Energy Group. I have led multiple economic and technical grid modeling engagements, including capacity expansion and production cost modeling, and testified before public utility commissions in Virginia, North and South Carolina, Michigan, Colorado, and Oregon. My clients range from government entities, state utility commissioners, non-governmental organizations, and trade associations, as well as large energy buyers. Overall, I am concerned that the pathways presented in Duke's resource plan do not present a meaningful range of alternative portfolios. Despite the high number of pathways, variants, and sensitivities, the companies have set up the model so that each alternative relies heavily on new gas generation, resulting in a plan that exposes ratepayers to significant risks. This flow deprives the Commission and stakeholders of the opportunity to evaluate the trade-offs between portfolios that continue to rely heavily on fossil fuel generation on the one hand, and potential portfolios that promote a cleaner and more flexible system through the deployment of no-regret assets on the other. In response to testimony from the Office of Regulatory Staff, Duke witnesses recognize the immense reliability implications of the increased reliance on fossil fuels for portfolio P0. But they turn a blind eye to the same risks in the company's preferred portfolio P3, which also unreasonably delays coal retirement and makes massive gas investments. It is important for the Commission to understand that the large amount of gas selected in Duke's analysis results from an artificial lack of alternatives in the model's assumptions. Specifically, the company's analysis includes a limited number of years during which renewable resources are not allowed to scale quickly enough to meet high load growth in the early 2030s, resulting in a build-out of combined cycle generation. As illustrated in Figure 4 in my direct testimony, Duke's own modeling shows that the capacity factors of these new gas units fall significantly within the first decade of use, accelerating the pace of clean, no-regrets replacement resources. Resources that the companies would eventually need anyway is a better solution and will protect ratepayers from the cost of these capital-intensive gas assets, which can and should be avoided, or at least significantly reduced. Betting on more flexible, shorter lead time resources will also allow the companies to truly check and adjust if there are significant changes to load and other circumstances. At a more granular level, my testimony illustrates how flawed assumptions in Duke's IRP place alternatives to gas-fired and coal-fired assets on an uneven playing field. For example, Duke models its aging coal fleet and gas resources as almost perfectly dispatchable, while discounting zero-carbon dispatchable alternatives, such as batteries, using an effective load carrying capability methodology that does account for known reliability risks. Duke defends this approach despite acknowledging the cost and reliability risks of its aging coal fleet and experiencing numerous outages of gas units during Winter Storm Elliott. While Duke points to its increased reserve margin as addressing the reliability failures of its thermal fleet, this actually distorts the relative contribution of thermal and renewable resources and can lead to an unreliable system in the near term and an overbuilt system in the long term. To illustrate this effect, consider an aging coal unit with a nameplate capacity of 100 megawatt on Duke's system that can only reliably provide 70% of its capacity during system peak. Instead of accurately capturing that, the utility assumes 100 megawatt firm capacity for the coal unit. As a result, to replace the resource with storage that has discounted capacity of 80% value, the model will only be able to replace that unit with a 125 megawatt storage resource. This introduces a bias into the model, favoring continued coal generation, making each megawatt of coal appear more valuable than it in fact is, relative to a firm megawatt from another resource. It also leads to overbuilding once the coal unit retires, especially if the utility increases the reserve margin to compensate for thermal outages, as Duke does, because the model thinks more megawatts need to be replaced than there actually are. Despite the bias in the company's approach, the model consistently selects solar and wind resources, limited only by the company's imposition of built limits on renewable energy. Although interconnecting large amounts of renewable resources can be a challenge, the companies are not using all the tools at their disposal to increase these limits and build these resources as an alternative to gas. Over the longer term planning horizon, the companies also continue to favor capital-intensive assets like hydrogen and small modular reactors that are not yet available and expose ratepayers to additional risk. In contrast, the companies completely omit consideration of long-duration storage that is already being deployed through pilot programs. To conclude, I would like to highlight two additional very timely issues that warrant Commission attention in this IRP proceeding. First, load growth. The company's supplemental IRP forecasts unprecedented load growth in its territory, driving even more gas additions in its near-term plan. But the Commission should understand that the types of load driving this growth are relatively new and consequently not based on historical data or any established methodology. Furthermore, any existing data is not fully transparent due to the proprietary nature. This hinders the Commission's and stakeholders' ability to fully review the load forecast, while the companies are incentivized to include an optimized outlook as it drives additional capital investment. In short, it is possible that some of those large loads do not materialize, but still could leave existing ratepayers putting a large bill. Second, Rule 111. As of this past May, the Environmental Protection Agency's Section 111 rule was finalized and will significantly limit operations of existing coal and new gas plants on the company's system. In rebuttal testimony, the companies assume that the new gas plants will be able to comply by operating at no more than a 40% capacity factor by 2032, after about 1 to 2 years of operation. However, this limit will significantly reduce the energy value they can deliver to the system, rendering those units, which already serve a temporary need, even more expensive. It is also important for the Commission to understand that continuing to just add combined cycle units with reduced capacity factors is not the only path forward under Rule 111. The only reason the company's 111 modeling results in this outcome is because the reoptimization incorporates the same resource limits and float assumptions as its preferred plan. In this sense, the result is expected, and the analysis is of little informational value. Unless the companies pursue other strategies and try to unlock additional renewable energy and energy storage, ratepayers will be locked into a portfolio with increasing costs and policy risks. Duke acknowledges that, and instead of pursuing strategies to mitigate these costs, chooses to simply recalculate the impact on ratepayers. That concludes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you, Dr. Rampani. Chair Powers, the witness is now available for questions from parties and the Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Duke Energy, any questions?
Yes, Chair. We have brief cross for Mr. Rampani.
Good morning, Ms. Rampani. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Belser.
I believe the witness's title is Dr. Rampani, is it not?
It is.
I apologize. Good morning, Dr. Rampani. Thank you, Chair or Commissioner Belser, for that notation, and it wasn't meant as any disrespect. It's just moving quickly this morning. So, good morning, Dr. Rampani. Nice to see you today.
Nice to see you.
All right, I'm Brett Braceford on behalf of Duke Energy. I have a few questions for you. In preparing your testimony, did you review the supplemental planning analysis that the companies filed on January 31st?
I did.
And did you also review, as part of that, the South Carolina chapter supplement presented in that supplemental planning analysis?
I did.
In that chapter of the company's supplement, they had a similar chapter in the initial plan, presented how the companies were analyzing their resource plan, the recommended portfolio, and the near-term actions that the companies are recommending as the most reasonable and prudent plan for South Carolina. Do you recall that?
I do, yes.
Okay. And the main driver of that supplemental planning analysis was I think as you heard from, or I'm sorry, were you here for Ms. Smith and Mr. Snyder's testimony yesterday? Were you able to listen to that testimony?
I was for Mr. Snyder's testimony.
Okay. And they were on the same panel, so you may have heard from both of them. But would you agree that the main driver of the supplemental planning analysis was unprecedented load growth that the companies have experienced in South Carolina and North Carolina over the year 2023, between the spring forecast and the fall load forecast, which the companies used to update their IRP modeling in that supplemental planning analysis?
Yes, my understanding is that the supplemental analysis mainly addresses these updated load forecast.
Okay. And do you have the South Carolina chapter supplement with you? Is that something you have available?
I do not have it in front of me right now.
Okay. Well, I can try to put it up on the Elmo. I just have a few things to mention, and they're fairly high level, so maybe we can work through the first one. Would you accept that this unprecedented load growth that the companies identified in the supplemental planning analysis increase the peak demand forecast by over 4,000 megawatts from what was presented in the 2022 resource plan load forecast baseline? Are you familiar with that?
I don't have the specific numbers, but my recollection is, matches what you're saying, that the company's analysis, the company's updated load forecast presents a large differential compared to the original forecast.
Okay, and that large difference, the significant unprecedented load growth the companies are experiencing in the Carolinas, is driving the need for new capacity, correct?
Yes.
All right. And you mentioned this new capacity in your summary, and these new loads, and I think you characterized them as relatively new and something that the companies have not, and the commission have not experienced before in South Carolina. Would you agree that the companies have an obligation to serve these new customers that are coming to South Carolina to build new factories and provide jobs in the state of South Carolina?
My understanding is that that the companies have an obligation to serve new clients.
Thank you. Are you familiar with the company's updated, I think you referenced this in your introduction to your testimony this morning as well, the updated near-term actions, the near-term action plan that was presented in the supplemental planning analysis?
Yes, I am.
Okay, and that was presented on page 35 of the South Carolina chapter supplement. Do you have that available?
Okay. I don't have those, but I could find them if that's
right.
necessary.
I can put it up on the screen here, I think, if that pleases the commission. So I think one of the sorry, I'll get this up here. Can you read that there?
Let me try. Okay. Yes, I can read that.
Okay.
It's not very clear, but I can
That's
try.
right. We're not
Maybe
going to
if
spend
yours
too
is
much
other
time in the
sense.
details of the words. I think the key point that I wanted to highlight was the amount of new generation that is proposed to be added in this supplement to the near-term action plan as presented in the South Carolina chapter. And so is it fair to say your testimony is focused predominantly on the risks of new natural gas generation? I think you articulated that in your summary this morning.
Yes, I am concerned with the amount of new gas generation that is proposed.
Right. But the company's near-term actions represent the results of the comprehensive modeling that was done and the results of the P3 fall-based recommended portfolio. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with the company's modeling, yes.
So in addition to the significant amount of renewable energy and battery storage that's identified in this updated near-term action plan, Duke's capacity expansion, production cost, and reliability verification modeling identifies the needs for 5 new gas combined cycles and 5 new gas combustion turbines to be constructed between 2029 and 2033 to meet the capacity and energy needs of the system and to ensure resource adequacy and power supply reliability. Would you agree with that?
I agree that the company's analysis concludes that those are needed. I have several concerns about whether the analysis itself, was comprehensive enough to include some viable alternatives.
Right. And I think this morning when you were presenting your summary and in your introduction to your testimony, you referenced that you have experience with capacity expansion and production cost modeling. Is that accurate?
Yes, I do.
But in this proceeding, you did not perform any alternative capacity expansion or production cost modeling, correct?
I did not.
And so you also didn't perform, or are you familiar, let me start with this question, are you familiar with the reliability verification analysis that the companies performed to confirm that the resources selected in the P3 fall-based portfolio would reliably meet system needs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year? Are you familiar with that reliability verification analysis?
Yes, you're referring to the one that's using SERVM, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, yes, I am familiar with that.
And you did not perform any reliability verification analysis to assess how your recommendations would impact the reliability of the plan, correct?
I did not perform any modeling in this proceeding. However, I am concerned with the way it was conducted by the companies, and especially for the reliability verification. I'm going to say that, although the preferred portfolio passes the reliability verification test, that does not mean that an alternative portfolio would not.
Okay, but you would agree with me that there's no modeling or alternative planning analysis in the record of this proceeding that demonstrates for this commission how the balancing factors of resource adequacy and power supply reliability can be achieved without constructing the new gas generation identified in Duke's near-term action plan.
I am not aware that any intervenor submitted alternative modeling.
Okay, so to the best of your knowledge, based on the record, there is no modeling or alternative portfolio that reliably meets the needs of the system.
There is no modeling that would, provide that portfolio.
And there's no alternative portfolio in the record of this proceeding that's been submitted that reliably meets the needs of the system.
Yes.
Thank you. So how many of the gas combined cycles and combustion turbines presented in Duke's near-term action plans do your clients support Duke constructing if the only modeling in the case says those resources are needed to maintain reliability?
I have not testified on a specific number of CC or CT units. I think that the amount that the companies are proposing introduces a lot of risks for ratepayers, both cost and policy risks. But given that I haven't performed alternative modeling, I'm not, providing a single number.
Okay. Would you agree with me that to retire the coal generation on the system, Duke has a responsibility and a requirement to maintain reliability to replace it with equally reliable replacement capacity?
Yes.
All right. And so Duke in their plan, they generally frame this as a replace before retire strategy. That's what they call it in the execution plan. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Okay. And as an example, the first combined cycle planned and then the first turbines are planned to replace coal plants at the Roxborough Steam Station in Duke Energy Progress, and then the 2 turbines at the Marshall Steam Plant in Duke Energy Carolinas to be placed into service in 2029. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm familiar with that plan. Yes.
Okay. And if the companies don't construct those new gas generating facilities, wouldn't you agree that it's imprudent and not reliable to retire those coal units that are now 50 plus years old?
Not necessarily. I don't think that gas is the only replacement option for those coal units. I think there are other options that the companies have not fully explored and that could support, like the same or even an accelerated coal retirement schedule. And these could include both renewable resources and energy storage.
More accelerated than 2029?
Yes, I mean, there could be replacement starting in 2028. For example, I know from having looked at previous carbon plans, at previous resource plans, that the companies had proposed retirement in 2028.
But to be clear, you've not done any modeling or analysis that demonstrates that the company can reliably retire those units and replace that capacity without building the resources that they have established are part of the near-term actions supported by recommended portfolio P3 fall base. You've not done any modeling or analysis that demonstrates something else would be reliable.
I have not done any modeling in this case, no.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, sir. Sierra Club, any cross?
No, we jointly sponsor the testimony of Dr. Rumpani.
All right. Carolina Clean Energy Business Association.
No questions, but thank you.
Walmart.
No questions, thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
No questions.
Commissioners. Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good, barely morning here, Dr. Rumpani.
Good morning.
I want to start with your expertise with IRPs.
Yes.
And from my 4 years of experience in doing this, and our second time working with comprehensive IRP, as I recall, initially we didn't have short-term, and I'm speaking generally. Let me start over. Our state statute does not require a short-term action plan. Do most IRPs that you've seen include near-term, short-term action plans?
Yes, many of the IRPs that I've reviewed include near-term action plans. The IRP analysis usually goes up to 2040 or 2050, but there are so many factors that are uncertain that no one could commit to, the next 15 years. But most of the IRPs I've seen include a near-term action plan for the next 5 to 8 years.
And I'm curious, given that, I'm curious how you have experienced those shorter term action plans and how they are considered from an implementation perspective, from a if you have any words of wisdom from that experience in terms of how we might think of the difference between what's in the short-term action plan that's actually getting implemented in that time frame and those that are being evaluated during that time frame.
Yes. So in most IRPs, the objective is to find a least cost, least risk portfolio that sometimes has to comply with state policies if they are in place. For the near-term action plan, both of those should be considered. So we're talking a lot about cost sometimes, but there is a very big element of risk. And there are certain resources that I would characterize more as no regrets resources. They have shorter lead time. They're not exposing ratepayers to fuel costs or policy risks. So for me, those no regrets would be kind of the no-brainer. Let's put those in the near term, and then if there is no other option other to pursue some of the more capital intensive generation, and it should be done within the near term, that's also included. But the ones that should be prioritized are the ones that I would and I have characterized in my testimony as no regrets.
I guess outside of your testimony, there is some debate about those elements that need to be evaluated in the short term versus those that are implemented in the short term. And I'm really asking I have no idea what the answer to this question is, but whether there is any wisdom in other IRP dockets for this state with regard to the differences between what you're evaluating in the short term and what you're actually implementing in the short term. What you're implementing, you're going to be paying for much more quickly than what you're evaluating. And this is just my one time to very publicly try to understand if there are tools that we ought to be considering as our IRPs mature over time. So I've tried to ask it in a slightly different way but I'll let it go if that didn't spark something you want to share.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but just something that I would share is that if we're talking about tools, for example, that are used in the modeling analysis, those get more and more sophisticated. We'll have more opportunities in the future to re-examine resources as we get more clarity and less uncertainty about certain technologies. It is a period of a lot of change, both in the tools that we're using and the resources that we're evaluating. This risk element that I mentioned before, it has been incorporated in IRP analysis as sensitivities or certain scenarios. At some point, we'll be able to more fully understand how to do that, even stochastically, and get a better sense of near term versus longer term issues. And again, I know maybe that doesn't fully answer the question, but just trying.
Well, one of the first things I was told when I became a commissioner is you don't ask questions that you don't know the answer to. But in this position, I want to learn, and I'm happy to learn openly. So I'm glad I asked it and appreciate your attempts. You talk in your testimony about the reserve margin and concern about the change from 17 to 22%. what other approaches could the company take with regard to reliability? Or do you have testimony relative to a specific number in between the 17 and the 22%?
So my concern for the reserve margin is that the way it was modeled, part of this like 5% increase, half of it, 2.5%, reflects historical outages of the thermal fleet. That thermal fleet is changing. A lot of those resources will not be online after 2031, 2032. So it would be more appropriate, in my view, to discount the firm contribution of those thermal resources and do not have the universal increase of the 2.5% in the reserve margin. So that, for example, an aging coal unit that can only provide 70% of its nameplate, it's reflected accurately in the modeling analysis versus saying that it can provide 100%, but then we're requiring more resources to be in the system. Because again, like that creates two problems. One is how this coal unit is compared to another resource, but also another unit that once this coal unit is outside of the system, the reserve margin is still it remains high. So we're talking about the reserve margin increases from 17 to 22 in 2031. I don't remember the exact amount, but a large part of the coal units, of the coal capacity, will be retired by then. So is the reserve margin, the increase in the reserve margin compensating for the failure of coal units that are no longer online?
Thank you. Would you recommend a new reserve margin study before we make a decision about this IRP or before the next comprehensive IRP?
Technically before the next comprehensive IRP, but I would like to caution that to the extent that this increase in 2031 drives investments in additional firm capacity, those should be examined very carefully. And just to say that what I'm proposing here in terms of appropriately discounting the capacity of thermal generation, that's not something new or different. That's the default way of doing it.
I'm sorry, what was the last thing you said?
That's kind of the default way of doing the capacity expansion modeling.
What would the impact of a smaller reserve margin be? Something greater than the 17%, but less than the 22%?
I have not done, I have not conducted the modeling, but my expectation would be that it would require a fewer incremental resources after 2031. Also, I think that if the company were to correct the thermal contribution of its existing coal and gas fleet right now, then it would show that it is important to bring online as soon as possible some resources in the short term, right? So I think that's another argument for the shorter lead time resources.
have you reviewed the recommendations of the Office of Regulatory Staff regarding the reserve margin?
I have reviewed OR's testimony, but I could definitely use a reminder on what the specific recommendation for the reserve margin is.
Well, my question really is that they indicate some concern about the fact that the company has not developed the IRP to fully meet the 22%. And do you have, what is your recommendation? What thoughts do you have about that concern? They suggested they suggested concern that if the reserve margin is at 22%, the company's not projecting enough resources to meet that reserve margin, I believe.
And I believe that these concern, the ORS is mainly concerned for the near term, maybe 2024 to 2030, before the reserve margin actually increases to 2022. And I do not believe that it necessarily needs to go at 2022 from 2024 to 2030. But if, like the dual here would be discounting the coal capacity, and that would reflect what's actually happening in reality, that there are some coal units in the system that are not reliable, and the companies need to add resources as soon as possible to make the system more reliable. Is there, maybe I wasn't clear in something?
Well,
I'm happy to follow up with more.
I'm reflecting over your last statement, and it sounded, maybe you could summarize what you said for me. Would you please summarize what you said?
Yes, okay. So I see those two views of either, overstating the coal capacity, let's say, overstating the coal capacity, but then requiring an increased reserve margin. That's one option. And then the other option is appropriately reflecting the discounted capacity of coal units and not requiring an increased reserve margin. And that has kind of two impacts. One is in the near term, if we were to go with the second option, it could show that in the near term, the companies need resources. And that's also shown in all their modeling, right? Everything that's available 2027, 2028, 2029 is consistently selected, right? But then starting in 2031 and afterwards, the increased reserve margin would lead to overbuilding the system. Because if if there is enough energy storage and other resources in the system that can meet the 17%, and there is no requirement for the increased 2.5% that compensate for the failures of the thermal fleet, or at least not, that high, not the 2.5, something smaller, there wouldn't be a need to build for the 22%.
Thank you. I think I've got it. So of the portfolio options that we have today, do you have a recommendation or one that you have the least concerns with?
I do not have a recommendation because I think they were constructed in a way that emphasizes new gas generation, all of them. What I've included in my recommendations was that my understanding from the company's modeling and from reviewing very carefully all of the results is that solar, wind, solar onshore wind and storage resources are economic, especially the renewable resources, and should be, selected. So I have included a recommendation for the levels of solar and wind included in P1. Now, for example, P1, although it includes a higher deployment of renewable energy, it still includes investment in gas resources. And if you look carefully, it has a different coal retirement schedule. So although it allows for more renewable resources to be included, and the model selects those, then more than 2 gigawatt from the Bales Creek resources goes out in 2030, which drives investment in gas. So for me, it would have been more insightful to see a portfolio, for example, that includes the higher deployment of energy resources without necessarily retiring both of those units in 2030, making it impossible for the model to select anything else other than gas.
Dr. Rapani, thank you very much. I appreciate all I've learned from you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Williams, no questions? Any other commissioners, any questions? Any redirect?
Dr. Rumpani? I have some brief redirect questions for you. Now, do you recall Duke Council's questions about their obligation to serve these new customers?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And are you an attorney?
No.
And do you have any in-depth experience or familiarity with South Carolina law surrounding this obligation to serve large customers?
No, I do not.
And now you were also asked some questions about modeling. Do you have experience actually running the capacity expansion and production cost modeling that Duke used to develop its IRP?
Yes, I have significant experience running Encompass, and I have actually presented alternative portfolios in some cases using Encompass.
So do you understand how the model would act with changes in inputs and assumptions?
Yes.
And are you aware that the commission can require the company to modify its IRP regardless of whether any other party has presented alternative models?
That is my understanding.
And now you were also asked some questions about the load forecast, as we touched on earlier. Is there substantial uncertainty in the amount of new load in Duke's forecast?
There is substantial uncertainty in the load forecast. My understanding is that things or large load additions can change, and the impact of a single customer changing could be significant even for the forecast, for the company's forecast.
And are customers like these large data centers that make up part of the forecast, are these very new to all utilities?
These are new to all utilities.
Now, changing gears, is gas the only resource that can reliably replace Duke's coal units?
No, it is not. And I think that was my main concern when reviewing the original filing and all the testimonies, that it is presented as the only alternative when it's not.
And are there other resources that could be brought online sooner to replace coal units?
Yes. Energy storage could act as a capacity resource. There are a lot of longer duration energy storage solutions that are currently tested and could be online maybe prior to 2030. And of course, renewable resources, including solar and wind. And demand side resources. I have not, testified extensively on those, but demand side resources could mitigate the need for additional generation in the system.
And do you agree that, pursuing, if these higher levels of storage and renewables are not pursued now, the company may have to rely more on riskier gas resources?
Yes, there is a significant risk of being locked into a path where there is no other solution, and that exposes ratepayers on significant risks, including federal policy risks, cost risks, and others.
And does replacing coal primarily with gas introduce some of the same fuel security and correlated outage risk that we've heard about with respect to coal resources?
Yes. The company's plan includes significant investment in gas resources that would, in a way, reduce the diversity of the portfolio and just make it very dependent on natural gas supply issues, for example, or gas price volatility issues. Some of those are in a common theme with coal resources and other fossil fuel resources.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Rampani. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Clancy. Any recross from any of the parties?
No recross.
Thank you very much. We are going to break early for lunch. We have a briefing we have to have. And I think your witnesses, Ms. Mixon has rolled in here on 2 wheels and came in the back door. So we're going to break now for lunch, and I would hope we could be back 1:45. Does that work? Give you a chance to talk to your witness.
Yes, that should work for us. We would ask that Ms. Rampani be excused.
Ms. Rampani, Dr. Rampani is excused.
Thank you.
All right, then we're going to recess until 1:45. Thank you.